What's up guys, I'm Rob Shaw and welcome to Raising Reef. In this tank build series episode we're going to be tidying up the rockscape and adding the substrate. If you saw the previous video, we secured all the rockscape together using milliput, which is a 2-part epoxy putty that you can mix up and stick the rocks together. It works perfectly well dry. You can also use it underwater. But the milliput dries a sort of yellowy, pale white cream colour. And it's very noticeable against this real reef rock, which has got a coralline look to it. So I'm going to be using some D&D's construction putty, which is coloured purple to match coralline algae, and we're going to cover over some of this milliput to hide the stark colour contrast between the putty and the rockwork. This epoxy is essentially the same as milliput and it works exactly the same way. It comes in 2 parts and you mix them together until you've got a uniform colour, and once you've mixed them all up and they're ready to use, you can apply it to the rockwork. The only difference between this and the milliput is the price. Milliput can be picked up relatively cheaply, this is a bit more expensive. If you've got lots of money and you don't mind spending out, then you could have just stuck the whole lot together with this stuff. But not having a lot of money to spend on the build and trying to be responsible about how much money I'm spending on this build, I've decided to stick the rocks together with the cheaper product, and I'm going to use the more expensive product in less quantity to just cover over those areas to get the desired look that I want. We may end up using all of this, but as I showed you in the previous video about using this stuff, I only like to mix up a smaller amount at a time. Makes it a little bit easier to manage. And you can always mix up some more if you need it. So with all that now mixed up, you can see it's sort of purple in colour. It's supposed to emulate coralline algae and blend in better with the aquarium. I'm just going to take some of this and place it over the top of the milliput that I've added to secure the rockwork, but essentially it's just a cover-up job. So that's about it for covering up the milliput with the construction epoxy. It's better, I think it's better than just the milliput itself. With those stark yellow blobs you could see every point on which the rocks were put together. I'm not going to lie, you can still see where the rocks are put together, but it's going to be a matter of personal preference on whether you think that you'd just be rather let the coralline algae naturally grow over all of the milliput that's in there. I felt it was worth a go so I can show you guys the difference, and if you choose to use it then that's up to you. Another good thing that you can do if you have some is if you've got any rock rubble lying around. I had a few pieces fall off of the boulders that I was using and I've saved a few of those pieces, and you can push those into the milliput in order to break it up a little bit and make it look a little bit more natural and cover it over with real pieces of rock. So that's another thing that you can do to help diffuse the points at which those rocks are put together, and that's worked really well for me in the past. But like I said, it's entirely up to you how you do this. Over time it's all going to get covered with corals and coralline algae and other things that are going to grow on the rockwork, so it's not essential, it just makes it look a lot nicer from the initial start. So with that done, we can now add substrate. So the sand that I'm going to be using in this tank build is an aragonite sand. It's natural coral sand, which is the same as you'd find out in the natural ocean. It's a nice fine size. I like finer grained sands. A lot of people will go for something a little bit more, a larger grain, in order to help stop it from getting blown up by the power heads. I like a fine grain sand, and the reason for this is simple. It packs tighter together, and then when anything settles out onto the sand bed, it doesn't work its way in between the grains and it sits on the top. This allows it to either be picked up by the current and transported off in order to get it down the overflow and into the filter, or the little critters that live in amongst the sand or on the sand will come along and get rid of it for you. I like to leave my sand bed completely to its own devices. I will add live rock. I'll probably add a cup of the live sand from my refugium into here to help seed it, and all of the little critters that will accumulate within the sand bed will keep it nice and clean. They will turn it over. I will be adding some Nasarius snails and some other sand sifting creatures that will work the sand over and turn it. And if you allow it to establish and you don't have fish that are going to decimate the population of these critters in the sandbed, it won't need vacuuming or siphoning or messing around with or stirring up. All you need to do is leave it alone, and all of these critters will keep it nice and clean. You can see this if you take a look at my refugium. It's been sitting there for the last maybe 2 years. I've never once touched that sandbed, and it is nice and clean. That is thanks to all of the worms and the critters and the little shrimps that are running around the sandbed, picking up any detritus or any particles and just keeping it nice and clean. So sand maintenance isn't a big deal for me. I also think that this sand makes up most of the biological filtration that's going to be happening in my tank. Therefore, I'm not overly concerned with the fact that this real reef rock isn't as porous as natural reef, real live rock. Real life rock is made up of the growth of corals, and as we know, these coral structures are very porous. You can tell this when you pick up a piece of live rock. If it's been dried out and it's dry rock, it's very light, and then it holds a lot of water, and loads of water will be running out of it as you lift it out of the water. This sort of rock isn't very porous. It may have holes in it, but I wouldn't say it's particularly porous, and therefore none of the deep denitrification that is said to occur within the inner structure of live rock is going to be happening with this. So the sand that I'm using is this one. This is aqua substrate. Any aragonite sand will do. It's all exactly the same. You can get it in slightly different particle sizes. I quite like the fine grain, as I said, so this is what I've decided to use. So let's add it to the tank and see what difference it makes to the overall look of the scape. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm happy with the position of my rockscape so that I can then pour the sand in and fill it around. That way I know that the rockscape is completely secure on the bottom of the tank and isn't going to be undermined by certain fish or whatever critters might be pulling around the sand underneath the structure and then cause it to destabilise. So let's have a look. I want it equally spaced from side to side and pushed far enough back just so that I can get in there behind with my aquarium cleaner to keep the back of the glass nice and clean. So this particular substrate has been washed before it's been packaged, and it's all dry and it's clean, and therefore I know I can just dump it straight into the tank. Some substrates will be different and you will need to give them a rinse before you use them. Also, it might be a good idea to get a magnet and put it inside a plastic bag and run it all the way through the substrate, because quite often some of these substrates can contain metal particles, and you will see they will all stick to the outside of the plastic bag, and then you can remove the plastic bag off the magnet, and this stops the fines from getting stuck all over the magnet. So let's add the substrate in and see how it looks. So that's the substrate added to the tank. I think it makes a really big difference to the overall look, and the aquascape has really come to life since I put the sand in there. It really gives you more of a sense of depth through the aquascape with the sand there, giving you sort of something to guide you through all of the little nooks and crannies. A 10 kilogram bag of sand has given me about an inch and a half covering throughout the aquarium, which is perfect. It's exactly the sort of depth that I wanted. And this is going to offer a really large surface area for all of the bacteria to biologically filter the aquarium. So we're one step closer to filling the tank full of water. The only thing stopping us from doing that right now is the fact that I've removed the sump and all of the pipework from the system so that I could remove the bottom shelf. I've previously painted the top shelf to protect the MDF against any salt water that may get onto it. MDF untreated is very porous, and any water that gets onto it is going to make it degrade and break down quite quickly. So you need to seal it in some way. If you don't want to paint it, you can use a diluted PVA solution to paint over it, and that will absorb into it. It won't add any colour to it, but it will seal it so that the water doesn't penetrate it. It kind of goes like a Weetabix. If it gets wet and it just sort of falls apart and it becomes a bit disgusting. So the bottom shelf at the moment is just drying from painting, and once that's dry I'll be putting it all back together, and we will be filling the system with some salt water and getting the cycle underway. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you did, subscribe to my channel if you want to see some more videos from me. Take it easy guys, and I'll see you in the next video.